Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tulpa Time Podcast. I'm your host, Lyrical, and this is my co-host.
I'm Longbow.
And today we're going to be talking about accidental tulpas. What an accidental tulpa is a tulpa you didn't really wish to create. You didn't set out with the active purpose of trying to create a tulpa. It just sort of came into being by various different means of maybe nurturing intrusive thoughts, or maybe you just had a tingling sensation in the back of your head that you thought, oh, what is this? I want to explore that further. Why do I keep randomly hearing voices? Am I going insane? And then you start to talk back to them, and next thing you know, you have a tulpa.
Yeah.
That's what the definition in quotation marks of an accidental tulpa is.
Basically anything that's becomes a tulpa, which wasn't planned.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many ways this can happen. For some people, it's like just kind of spontaneous almost. They start having like hallucination-like visions of a figure, like I don't know, just some character they like, or another human, and then they kind of compound on these by giving it attention, and it becomes more aware, it becomes more active, and eventually develops into a tulpa. And for some people, it's kind of starts out smaller, like maybe they only hear some small voices, or in the case of already fully kind of full-fledged tulpamancers, people that have already planned a tulpa and made one, perhaps they're just hanging out with their tulpa in the wonderland, and something else happens that kind of leads into another tulpa being created. They find like some sort of mental figure, which could be interpreted as maybe just a servitor or an NPC, if you would call it that. And then they just kind of keep interacting with this figure until it develops a sort of self-awareness, sort of autonomy.
And we've actually met several people who have had this happen to them. They've had either that happen to them, or they had like another common theme as far as accidentals go is having an imaginary friend when you were younger, and never really losing that imaginary friend. You keep having the imaginary friend, like you never grow out of that stage where you have imaginary friends, and as you get older, you start to acknowledge their existence more and their sentience more, and you realize, oh my god, I have a tulpa on my hands. And we know a guy who actually has had that happen to him multiple times.
Yeah, it just starts off like he was daydreaming a lot. He would often like play out scenarios in his head, and he would have recurring characters in them. And eventually, these recurring characters developed into something more than just kind of like an actor in a scene he was playing out. They weren't fully controlled by him. They started having their own thoughts, their own emotions, and they developed. And they actually, possibly, I would say, got to a tulpa-like level of sentience before the person even knew what a tulpa was.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, remember what he talked about was when he found out that what tulpa were, one of his tulpa said, "This is stupid. This is really cringy. What the hell is this?" And then they had the eureka moment where he's like, "Holy shit, that's me. I'm a tulpa." And that's pretty crazy, in my opinion. Like, had to be a really staggering moment of self-actualization to realize what you are.
It must have been amazing, like, to kind of be, like, having all these doubts about, is my host just crazy? What is going on? And then you find this whole community, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah.
My whole life now has validation, outside validation.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. And must have been a very, very beautiful moment, I would say. I would go so far as to even call it beautiful.
Well, the way they described it, they said it was beautiful for one, and then the other one that they had found it incredibly traumatic and disappeared because it was actually the opposite feeling for him.
Yeah. But to kind of go on that point, they're on better terms now.
Oh, yeah, they're in a much better place.
It's not like they suddenly disappeared and were gone forever.
Yeah.
They patched things up.
Yeah,
it took a while, but they patched things up. So, I mean, like, one thing I'd like to get into is how would a person kind of let this happen, right? I mean, for me, I'm not sure about how you would feel, Lyrical.
That's actually what I was going to talk about was...
Yeah, but I mean, like, in terms of like how you'd let it happen, I usually think of myself as pretty aware of my own like cognitions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I like to think of myself as pretty knowledgeable about what's going on in my mind. I mean, that might just be a fallacy, but I can't really see myself nurturing a sort of like intrusive thought into an accidental tulpa without realizing it. But for some people, you know, that can just kind of happen. One way I've heard it described by another person who had an accidental tulpa is that he started having visions of a girl around the same age as him, and she was just kind of persistently there. He started seeing her in his head.
He would imagine scenarios with her.
Yeah, he would start talking to her, and she would talk back. And I asked him, like, why did you keep doing this? And he said, you know, you just don't question a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He would just, like, enjoyed her company. He enjoyed talking to her. And he'd never, like, kind of had that self-aware moment where he's like, why am I really doing this? What's really going on? He just kind of held on to it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
No. He just helped by accidentally a tulpa. He didn't mean to create a tulpa. It just happened. I can speak from a little bit of experience on this too. Whenever you get done with your point.
No, go right ahead.
Okay. I actually have an accidental tulpa. Her name is Rosalina. She basically came into my life about 3 years ago. What it started out is, and this is going to lead into the point I say after I talk about her. She started out as a thought in the back of my head. Initially, I heard a voice, and I'm like, I already hear voices, so I'm already pretty insane, right? But I'm like, this wasn't either of the two tulpa that I had at the time. And I heard it. Okay, I'll go ahead and tell the story.
Just lead them all through it.
I was in the bathroom, and I was using the bathroom. I was peeing. And I said a joke to myself, and when I heard a voice in my head say, I get it, but it wasn't either of the two voices that I...
Your other two tulpas.
Yeah, my other two tulpa. It wasn't them. So I was like, what was that? What? And so I started thinking about it, and thinking about it, like, could that have been a tulpa? Plants that seed?
Mm-hmm.
Even subliminally, you don't mean to, you know? It just plants that seed. And I think that almost... Well, before I knew it, she just kind of like appeared before me, and she was like, "Well, I'm here. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere."
Yeah.
And then of course later on, after she discovered that she was an accident and I didn't plan for her to be there, it led to some problems with her. But she got through them, thank God.
Yeah.
But
I can say that she has developed and grown a lot since when she was first kind of came into being.
Definitely.
So let me ask you this: when she first kind of like showed up and you were kind of questioning whether she was a tulpa, do you think she was like instantly like at a tulpa like level of sentience and self-awareness, or was it more like, you know, a proto-tulpa stage? What are your feelings
I
on
like
that?
to think she was at a proto-tulpa stage, and then when she was there, I was like, well, now that I feel like there's something here, I'm not going to just ignore and get rid of it.
Right.
I'm not going to, if it's almost like an accidental pregnancy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to just, like, get rid of it. Oh, God, I'm getting fucking political.
Not going to do a tulpa abortion.
I'm not trying to get political here or whatever. But what I'm saying is, with a tulpa, I'm not going to try and get rid of a tulpa that appeared to me and, you know, was, like, being really nice to me. And right. I was like, I can just nurture her. And, you know, when she finds out that I didn't mean to create her, then it might be a problem. But here's the thing, though, I wanted to add to it. I think that people who have... and this is a stance of mine, it does not fact. I have no refuting evidence other than what I've seen and my own desire.
Like everything here, it's all kind of subjective at certain degrees. So
I believe that you have to have at least a subliminal desire to have a tulpa, or to have an imaginary friend, or to have something more there. For them to, I believe that to me, that seems like that has to be a key factor.
And you think that's what leads to accidental tulpas? This sort of subliminal, subconscious desire.
Yeah, I believe there has to be at least some sort of small desire there that makes you kind of want to have a tulpa. But, I mean, then that begs into question, what about the people who don't even know about tulpas? How can they want to have a tulpa if they don't know they exist? I really don't have an answer for that, honestly.
I guess it's just sort of a desire to have a companion, to have someone around you that understands you really well and would get along with you and, you know, be there for you, but also not in the traditional sense, like wanting to have another human friend.
Yeah.
You want, like, something different. Maybe there's feelings of disillusionment with, like, typical friendship in society, you know. But it could be something else. I mean, I don't really have a good answer for that either, you know.
Yeah, it's got to be on a deeper level. You got to want a companionship, I think. And when I think that people who already have Tulpa, I think that that's the main thing that ends up leading them to more accidentals, because they already have Tulpa, and so they like desire more. And I think that at one point it does start to get a little bit out of hand, and you really got to keep your mind in check, because if you walk around with 14 different Tulpas, it's going to get really clustered in there.
It's going to be weird, and one way or the other, I think someone's going to get neglected. You know, and I don't think that's a good scenario to be in. Personally, I would say, you know, when you take on the mantle of a Tulpamancer, you need to have responsibility. You need to think as you're forcing and as you come across Tulpa-like entities in the Wonderland that you didn't plan. But, I mean, that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
It's not like the written law, but that's generally the way I like to go about it myself. I like to think about, okay, this is getting a little too sentient and autonomous. Maybe I'll just, you know...
pull back the reins a bit.
Yeah, just pull back, go some other place, you know.
Stop
maybe
ignoring.
not keep nurturing this.
It's if you don't want a Tulpa. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Which leads me to the part we were talking about before this podcast. It seems like a lot of people who create accidental Tulpas have them based on a character that they created in like something like an RPG or a video game.
Yeah.
That takes on a life of its own in their mind, and they'll be like, man, I wish that character was real. I'm going to imagine this character here with me. And they're like, oh, this is so cool. And then eventually their curiosity gets to them, and they go online and they type in imaginary friends for adults, and then bam, Tulpa pops up, and like, oh my god, that's what you are.
Yeah.
I've created a Tulpa, and I didn't even know it.
Yeah, it's pretty common, especially with like artists and writers, comic book makers. You know, they'll create a character, and they'll think about all the different scenarios. They'll think about all the different ways this character would essentially live, and from that it develops. There's actually been studies on this for fiction writers.
Oh yeah,
who will, as they're writing a book, find that the characters in a way start to write themselves. They'll even get to the point where they'll argue with the author about what's happening.
About what they would do, what they would say in that situation. Because they created this character. Yeah,
they created it, but it starts having its own sort of thoughts and sentience. And the research article I saw about it referred to it as the illusion of independent agency. Obviously, the sort of scientific world doesn't really see them as fully fledged separate consciousnesses like us in the community do, and that's fine because there's not a lot of objective scientific fact around it. I don't expect that from the scientific community until like a lot more work has been done into the nature of minds and how they work. But
and consciousnesses and all that.
It's still interesting to see the parallels, though.
Yeah, and I think I'm almost relieved that they're temporary consciousnesses, because it would really, really suck if these artists were just creating Tulpa and didn't know it, and then they just die. They just abandon and die after the book's over. I want to say that these are almost like super cognitive servitors.
Yeah, in a way, like maybe like kind of
quasi Tulpa or something like that.
Yeah, like proto Tulpa. Hard to define, really, but you know, somewhere around that stage where it's like they're kind of reaching towards autonomous sentience, but not really fully grasping it. And that's mostly, I guess, due to the host. You know, they don't really like see him that way.
And that makes me wonder, though. that makes me really wonder if an artist that had this happen to them, this phenomena, knew about the Tulpa community and knew what Tulpa were, do you think that would change things? And they'd be like, oh shit, you could be a Tulpa, and the next thing you know, they have a Tulpa?
Yeah.
Do you think believing is a key aspect, or knowing what you have is a key aspect to having a Tulpa?
I think, yeah, it does. It's not the only thing, of course.
Oh, no, of course.
But I think it's a matter of two things. You know, having the belief that they are a Tulpa and that you would treat them that way, that would affect your actions.
Mm-hmm.
You would visit them, you would, interact with them, you'd talk with them. And also, you would restrain doubts about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't just say, oh, I'm fucking going crazy.
Yeah, the artist sees them as like, oh, this is just like a tool I'm using to help me write. Right. So they don't believe in their autonomy. Their autonomy, and they don't believe in their own, cognitive reasoning. They don't believe in any of that.
No.
So, therefore, without that belief, that's like the key that unlocks the door to having a Tulpa. They don't believe that it's a Tulpa, and they're like, oh, this is just a figment of my imagination. It'll go away as soon as the book's over. And some of them, I want to believe that somewhere out there was an artist who made a book, in the process of which they're like, man, this is really vivid. I'm going to look up imaginary friends for adults, and bam. They found out Tulpamancy, and they're like, now I have a Tulpa.
Really? It's possible. I mean, maybe there is a community of writers who have experienced this phenomenon online and
maybe
drawn parallels to it in their own kind of community that they're talking about this phenomenon with. But I don't know. It's hard to say if there is a writer out there that has experienced that, and
even anyone on anywhere that hears this, if you're a writer and you have a Tulpa, like leave a comment, post something. I mean, like, say, I was writing a character and then bam, it came to life because I realized what Tulpa were, or I'd heard about him or something like that. Definitely. That would be really cool.
That would be really
interesting,
really cool to see.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Anyway, there's two people that I've met who've had Tulpas that were created by humoring a voice that they heard and they almost didn't want a Tulpa. The Tulpa was like, too bad I'm here anyway. And then there are a couple of other ones, one in particular, that had Tulpa from when he was a young child. That was an imaginary friend that sort of grew up into a Tulpa, and once he found out what it was a Tulpa. And I wonder to myself, which one of these is more common? People who create, like, OC characters and then just give them life and like, man, I wish they were real, and then it becomes an accidental Tulpa.
Yeah.
Or I wonder if it's people who've had imaginary friends. I think that the imaginary friend case is probably far more rare, wouldn't you say? I
would say so. Mostly because it's really hard to kind of keep those habits throughout all of middle school and high school, I would say. Not trying to sound judgmental or anything.
No, it's just very rare for anyone to be like that ever.
It would be very difficult, and there would have to be, quite a bit of social isolation for your friends not to notice, or for some people to notice, and then you would get bullied and harassed about it.
And we're not saying anything bad about this person that we know.
No, of course not. It's just that, that's the way I kind of would see it, is that, those experiences would affect how you see it, and therefore it would change, your outlook.
Yeah.
So I'd say it's probably a lot more rare.
Yeah.
I'd say, people creating their own original characters and developing them to that point is most likely
the more common.
Yeah. I would say so. And
see, I actually did, sorry for interrupting.
No, go ahead.
I actually did ask his Tulpa, the one that he's had ever since he was like 5 years old, what it was like going through the edgy teen years, because a lot of people go through those rebellious years when they're a teenager, especially right around puberty, where they try to distance themselves from childlike things.
Distance themselves from their parents.
Yeah, they distance themselves from all these things that made them a kid. It's like all of a sudden I can't like Pokemon because little kids like Pokemon and I gotta be an adult because I'm 13 and life's hard.
Yeah.
So those years, I asked him, did your host ever say, oh, well, I don't believe in you anymore, I don't need an imaginary friend anymore? And he said there were some harder times, but for the most part, he was always around. So that leads me to believe that either one, his host was like, I don't care. This is my imaginary friend. I'm keeping him forever. Or he just kind of went dormant in the back of his host's mind and was like, I'll come back when he's ready, you know?
Right.
I think that one, I would say, is probably more likely the thing.
I would say so. Or the imaginary friend / proto-tulpa / I don't know, however you'd like to describe it, would only appear in scenarios where he needed it.
Yeah. Like
like he was emotionally distraught and he just needed a friend.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see why he wouldn't welcome that experience during those times.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, accidental tulpas, they can be the best thing that ever happened to you if you acknowledge their existence and you are like, wow, this is what I have now. I have a friend that knows me better than anyone else, and this is great. I didn't even mean to create it. And it kind of seems it's not fair. Honestly, it's not fair for the people who sit there and meditate for like 6 months and like really focus and try to hear every little voice and try to dig through all the mental mud to get to the tulpa buried underneath.
Yeah.
And then you got people who are just like, well, man, I just woke up and they were there.
Yeah.
And you're just like, well, fuck you. That's not fair. You basically hacks. I call hacks on your tulpa creation.
Well, it's just the way I see it is certain people, due to the structure of their brain or their upbringing or however you want to look at it, they just have a natural kind of tendency to be more open to developing a tulpa.
Mm-hmm.
They have a more tendency to, visualize more, daydream more, think about voices, and talk with like imagined characters maybe.
That's me when I was younger. When I was younger, I would visualize things all the time. Like
Yeah.
I would visualize when I was driving down the road Goku and Frieza fighting beside the car window, and I would visualize I was in a different place. I would meditate even when in my teen years.
Wow.
A lot. I did meditate a lot when in my teen years because high school sucks.
Yeah.
I was just like I wasn't too much of an edgy teen, but everyone has those moments where they're like, ugh, my life's so hard. I'm in high school.
And it felt good to, kind of get away from that and, have a place and
Music
perhaps
helped too.
music and, have your own place that you could kind of retreat to for a while as a little escape. But yeah, I personally did not have a lot of experience visualizing and daydreaming. I had some, like I would say the normal amount. But the thing I had, which kind of separated me from the norm, is I would always have an inner monologue going. And oftentimes I would catch myself imagining myself in arguments with other people, kind of seeing like how they would play out. Like I would think about a person who I spoke to in the past and what our future conversations might be about. And it was almost like a way of practicing, right?
Yeah, like practicing audio imposition.
Kind of.
Almost.
It was all in my head. So it wasn't about creating an external auditory hallucination. It was more about just this person kind of gets on my nerves, so the next time I talk to them, I want to know what to say.
This is what I would say. And then you don't say it.
No, then I meet them again, we have a completely different conversation, and it doesn't even come up.
Yeah.
But those things, I think, kind of helped me a little bit with doing narration and stuff, but it didn't help me so much that I was prone to having an accidental tulpa.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I've only had one.
Yeah.
I know people who've had like 4.
Yeah.
So, basically, to wrap things up, today we covered accidental tulpas, the different ways they come up. The most common of which we believe to be humoring an intrusive thought that comes from like maybe a character you created in an RPG, or based off a character from a book, or something like that you created yourself. Now.
But there's other tulpas that could come up.
Definitely.
From different means. It's pretty subjective, but can happen almost out of the blue for some people. Can be more of a gradual thing for most others.
It can be a moment of like realization where you're like, this thing that's been talking to me this whole time is this.
Yeah.
That seems like a very common scenario too. Like, oh, I had this friend this mental being that I talked to this long time, and then I went and typed in imaginary friends for adults, and then bam, now they're a tulpa.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much all we wanted to say. We're gonna wrap it up for now.
Yeah.
This has been Imaginary Friends for Adults. I'm just kidding. This has been Accidental Tulpas. Tulpa Time. I'm your host, Lyrical.
And I'm Longbow.
This is Longbow. And we will see you guys next time. Hope you learned something. If you didn't, I'm sorry.